Okay, looks like we are live. And looks like there's a few people on. Y'all could let me know how the sound and video quality is. It looks like it's saying the stream health is good, which is good. So let me know, send me a text, or you can type in the chat. All right. Let's see here. We'll give it a second. Give it another minute and see if anyone else wants to hop on. It's the first time I've done this since I've been back to flying. And so it feels like it's been a while, actually. Feels like it's been a few months since I've done this. Even though it's really just been maybe a month and a half. Not even, I don't think. It's like beginning of August. So, all right. Well, if you are on, it looks like there's one person on. If you're on and can shoot me a text or post in the live chat and let me know how the sound and video is, that would be awesome. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I have been working. Been working a lot, and when I haven't been working, I've been here in Port Orchard with Larissa and her family. And I had a good chunk of time off recently. Today's the last day of about 4 days off. Was supposed to spend it in Portland, and the air quality wasn't good, so Larissa and I planned a very spontaneous trip to the Grand Canyon and to, where else did we go? I'm blanking. See, we went to the Grand Canyon, and then we went to Zion National Park, stayed there for a couple days, and then we checked out. I think it's called the Seven Mountain. I don't know. It's basically this art installation that's about 25 minutes outside of Vegas, and it's really, really cool. It's these like huge stones that were painted and stacked on top of each other. So we did that, and we have another trip tomorrow at like 10 a.m., another 3-day trip. So yeah, I'm going to try. I think my goal for getting back into flying and doing this is to do 3 a month. If I can get 3 a month, I think it's very doable. And on top of next month, going ahead and recording the first of my series on could our anxiety be our savior? This is going to be the topic, and I'm going to do some videos on anxiety and reimagining the way we relate to our anxiety. So that'll be fun. But anyways, that's kind of what's been going on. I'm a little bit exhausted because the trip was fun, but a lot of driving and flying and just getting my body back rested today for our work trip tomorrow. Let's see. Yeah, so if this is your first video, I'm kind of doing this to have a series of videos on different topics that friends and family have given me to kind of be this um, video journal, looking at what my thoughts were on things and how I articulated them at 33. And when I started doing this was when the pandemic started, and it just seems like there's more and more kind of current things to talk about. And I haven't felt super strongly about addressing a lot of the things that have come up. I think in some of the beginning videos I did a little bit more, but it's just interesting. It's going to be fun to look back and be like, this is what was going on. This is what I was thinking about things during this time in history, where it just seems like we could create like 3 to 4 novels just out of what's happened this year. Just so much stuff. Um, so yeah, that's kind of why I'm doing this. Not necessarily creating these videos um, from an attitude of feeling like I have all the answers, but more wanting to reflect on my own personal perspective on things, um, and get them recorded. And I'm doing it live so that I have the opportunity to get some live feedback and interaction. Um, so I need to get better about planning these out and actually sticking to a plan so that if people want to um, come on and show up live, they can. Um, so, anyways, hope y'all are doing super well. The other thing I was gonna do before I got into the content, um, which basically I've got a hat and I am pulling names from the hat, and I have all the names I've got connected to topics that people sent me, and I'm just picking a topic and talking about it. So that's the main thing I'm doing here. I am going to do something a little bit different on the front end today. Larissa and I um, just had a layover in a long, like day and a half layover in Greensboro, and we got 2 different decks. One was like a traditional tarot deck, and one was a mudra deck. And if you're not familiar with mudras, probably the classic mudra would be like the one that you see some Buddha statues do, where they're like sitting like this. You see a lot of religious iconography, specifically Christian iconography. Well, you'll see these saints doing different mudras, and there's a lot of stuff about them, a lot of ways to understand them from even kind of an Eastern medicine standpoint of like pressure points and different things attached to different parts of your body. And then there's kind of spiritual implications. So this deck, I'll show you, it's really cool. It has all different mudras and then some kind of like uh, written content on the back. So I did a pull today for my sit. I did a 30-minute sit before our video, and I pulled this one. It says opportunity, take your chance. And it says this mudra synchronizes the 2 halves of the brain, activates one's memory, improves one's ability to absorb and reproduce knowledge in exam situations, for instance, and is good for the lungs as well. And then it has more of an in-depth kind of more internal spiritual thing, which I can send to someone if they want. But this is it. It's basically just, you know, putting all your fingers end on end and sitting like that. So I did that for a little bit at the beginning of the set. Thought I'd share that with y'all. that interests anyone. So I went ahead and did the name pool before um, the video, so I wasn't scrolling through my phone and all of that during. And so, yeah, I pulled my friend Michelle, and she actually had given me, I had to actually go through because there were two sections where she had given me some content, and I decided to just go ahead and start with the first part, which was she asked me a kind of really specific question on one of my videos. And I think I had originally intended to respond to it on like a follow-up video, like at the beginning. But I decided I was just going to take today and kind of tease through the question. Um, it's it's somewhat of an overwhelming question, so it's going to be a challenge for me to kind of in the moment sift through a lot of thoughts and feelings and try to give you a little bit of an organized um, run through on the question. But basically, your question was, when did my let me I have it pulled up. I want to read it. This is why I drew it. It was on religion and Christianity, and she specifically said, "Where did your views on religion and Christianity start to change?" Um, I think she might have meant when, but actually I like the verbiage of where. Where did they change? Because I think they're kind of two sides of the same coin, um, and so I'm gonna just go with that one and see what comes out, see what's going on up there. This is actually something I think about a lot um, because my uh, Christian faith and the Christian tradition was so formative, um, and it was such a unique atmosphere to grow up in, especially in the 90s in Atlanta and with everything that was going on. And and then in my late 20s, moved into actually um, basically working for a church um, where I was not necessarily paid, was moving in that direction, but I was working a job that allowed me to give large amounts of my time and energy towards doing a lot of ministry work for an inner city church in Atlanta. And oh, my nose is itchy. My face is still recovering from being in the desert and being all dried out. But anyway, so I think about it a lot. And the quick answer to when or where did it change would be that it was kind of always changing. Um, so I'll kind of go through and hit a couple key points of when it seemed at least to change a little more dramatically. But if I'm really honest, when I look back on my relationship with religion and my relationship with Christianity, it was kind of in this constant flux. And to be fair, I think that's everyone's experience, but mine was definitely, at least from my perspective, it seemed to change a little more rapidly and consistently than most. Um, Part of that is that I didn't really have one church or one church community that I stayed with my whole life. Even I would say from 0 to like 15, 16, I had probably been a part of 6 to 7 different church communities, environments, and some of them were very, very different. Different values, different liturgy would be the technical word. What they would do, and the kind of the culture was very different. The values of some of them were very, very different, and so um, that led me to an experience of things were constantly shifting and changing because the community was. And at the time, I never viewed that as a negative thing or necessarily even a positive thing. I think there was a period in my life where I realized that I had kind of a uh, scattered view on who God was and what it meant to live that out, because I had so many different experiences with different faith traditions that were um, just Christian traditions. So even within that, there was a challenge to kind of answer that question of what does it mean to, you know, live a life that is um, in line with the values of Christ. Um, and practically, what does that look like? Idealistically, what does that look like? Because there were just so many different flavors of that I was handed. So yeah, I would say hmm, what is the first time I want to talk about as far as a shift and change? Um, so mm, normally I would start with my senior year in high school. And that time, like high school and college, that transition was like so formative of the kind of way everything changed. But I'm gonna actually start with um, uh, the transition from how do I say this? Um, here's what I'll start with. The first 10 years of my life in religion was focused heavily on having this very um, personal, intimate experience with the divine. Um, and the actual services in a lot of ways were centered around what was called the presence of God. So it was a very kind of real, sincere, genuine spiritual experience. And a lot of these gatherings would have these services that were centered kind of around worship music. That was it was very repetitive, and it was like full on rock band. The atmosphere was very loose. There wasn't a lot of like expectations on how people should express themselves in these services. So there was a very um, uh, there was an okayness for people to express themselves in a lot of ways that may look and seem very strange to the normal everyday person. And the best thing I know how to relate this to outside of those settings that I've experienced is ecstatic dance. And I understand that's also probably kind of a um, a niche experience a lot of people haven't experienced. But basically, ecstatic dance is in the actual purest forms of it, there are these non-religious spaces for people to just have a freedom of movement, non-judgmental space to move their body with music um, and kind of dance in a setting that is safe, is a safe space. Um, a lot of spaces will set some kind of intention at the beginning. A lot of times there's someone that's DJing or has had put a playlist together, and you're typically not talking. If you want to talk, you go outside, and it's just this very um, it's just really kind of open-ended, free, expressive space, and that's a lot of how um, those those worship services were kind of geared, and that was very formative to me growing up because it encouraged me to have my own experience and my own journey with that, and it set a tone for kind of an expectation of like, this is all good and this is all well, but if I don't have some kind of like something real that's happening with me, then I should kind of relook and rethink about that. So, and there was definitely a lot of teachings around that where there was language like personal relationship with Christ and all that, but it was kind of baked into the culture too. Um, I think I've talked about that on a number of these videos, but that I will say like that set a foundation for consistent change where it allowed me to have something that was grounded and real and true while everything else was kind of ebbing and flowing and changing. And my parents at home didn't um, create an environment where we were expected to necessarily like be really religious. And it was the main focus in our home life was really kind of living these things out. It wasn't like this is the way it's done, and there wasn't a lot of control or like preaching around um, the religious stuff. A lot of that information and ideology and theology actually came from the different churches we were a part of, and that was very scattered, and there was a wide array of thoughts and opinions, whether they were theological, political, what have you. It was a kind of wide spread of that. So that was especially 0 to 10 in the charismatic church. That was the focus was on these very supernatural kind of like at points hallucinogenic experiences, and just kind of an openness for divine encounters and an encouragement to kind of expect them. So yeah, um, I'll say that there was a lot of really wacky stuff that was involved in it, and then we moved into other communities that were maybe a little more stale, but a little more steady, and in certain ways, maybe a little a little more mentally healthy and emotionally healthy, but with their own hang-ups. Um, and so it's definitely a tremendous mixed bag growing up. And then when I got into high school, it was like senior year of high school into college, things started kind of uh, not fitting for me uh, in an authentic way. And I had that kind of value for something authentic. And so I was really in this space of trying to figure out what was real and what wasn't, and how I wanted to engage with faith and Christianity and religion. And um, there was a charismatic church that we had as a family were going to, that was probably the place where I was experiencing the most profound kind of spiritual experiences. Um, but the church ended up falling apart. And so that happened simultaneously with me working at this restaurant and developing a really strong sense of community at this restaurant and partying with the people at the restaurant. And so there was kind of this moral dilemma of like, the things I'm doing are naughty, in the eyes of the church. And I'm having these really powerful, crazy experiences at church that are really beautiful and really meaningful to me. But I don't really have a sense of community there. This is my sense of community, and I feel very loved and accepted and valued, um, and free to kind of be me in ways I don't feel uh, in this church. And then I'm, going to college, and so I'm learning about the history of religion. I'm learning about, all these things. My mind's being opened in so many different ways, um, and it was kind of this perfect storm for me to question a lot of things. One, like, shouldn't I be experiencing unconditional love in a community setting in the church? Like, shouldn't that be what that's for mostly? But yet I'm experiencing it here in this extremely secular setting, um, and a lot of times in a party environment. Um, and so that was kind of the first time in my life when things really started shifting and shaking, and led me into a period of not being involved in Christianity for a number of years. Um, and then I had what I would say was my first uh, personal mystical experience, where I had an experience with with the divine, with some kind of um, experience or presence that was just as real as my real experiences, but very beyond it. I felt it kind of at a heart level, where I definitely had a tremendous shift on the way that I kind of my paradigm shift, like multiple things just shifted in the way that I understood um, reality and understood myself. Um, there was also this real inner experience that happened in my car. I wasn't in any kind of um, religious setting, and it became very real for me and ended up leading me back into the church. But this time I was going into Christianity to um, to kind of express this thing that was happening to me and have a place to kind of go deeper in it and understand it, um, and try to move towards whatever that experience was with other people, instead of like going there to get that. um, and it was very real for me. It was a very real, important, personal thing, and it didn't happen in the community. It happened outside of it. So um, it was just a very different relationship when I went back. And um, so that definitely was a time that drastically changed my relationship with Christianity, um, and religion. Um, and then gosh, there was a series of, I want to say 7 to 8 years, um, where there was a lot of pretty profound changes uh, along the way. A lot of things that happened to me that are very important, and I could spend way too much time talking about. Um, but I think the latest, most profound thing that happened that I want to spend at least a little bit of time talking about is I got to this point where um, I began to realize that on my own personal path, in order to really move forward, I needed to take all this time and energy that I was putting into um, how do I say this? Kind of my outflow. So a lot of how I do understand a real, sincere spiritual life is that there's this connection I have with myself and the divine um, that's very personal to me and fills me up. It's this very generative experience, and then everything kind of flows out of that place um, if it's healthy and genuine and sincere. And I was focused a lot more on the output than the input. And I was really the output was focused on everyone else. And it was very sacrificial. It was coming from a lot of beautiful and genuine and sincere places of compassion and love and purpose and care and even really beautiful um, sacred things that I was holding on to in my religious tradition, with just the sacrificial love that we see in the person of Christ, and um, all the really powerful implications that can have for us. So that was fueling just a lot of output, and I started realizing that until I actually started shifting and turning that output back on me, and me becoming a healthier emotionally, spiritually, physically, relationally individual. Um, I was going to keep hitting this kind of wall that I was hitting, and how effective and uh, quote unquote fruitful I was able to be um, in my life at that point. And there was just this really genuine sense of um, this is what God wanted for me, was to really learn to take care of myself really well, and um, to invest all of that time and energy that I was investing in other people towards myself. It was a really challenging shift because um, it felt wrong in a lot of ways, where I was like, just too focused on myself, and this feels really wrong. Like I should be just giving my life away to, you know, other people and all these selfless acts. But I just knew. I mean, I had a very clear understanding, but I also had this kind of intuitive understanding that, like, until I um, started really caring for myself, and making that the most important thing, I wasn't gonna get uh, anywhere good very quickly. So when that shift happened, I really focused on that. It changed my relationship with religion, and changed my relationship with the way I understood God, and it changed my path and trajectory almost completely. Um, and um, there's so many different ways that it did that it's a little overwhelming to even uh, try to figure out how to articulate it. But I'll say that it started with developing a very authentic prayer life. um, and one where I was learning how to be with myself in a very real and authentic way and have some kind of communion experience would be kind of the Christian language, but like unitive experience or an experience of oneness. In the Buddhist tradition, they would call it kind of emptiness or anatta, not self, or the deathless. Um, but what began to shift was the words that I used or the ideology that I had were not near as important as what was happening and what my experience was and what was occurring. And I was shifting away from holding really tightly to ideology and holding really tightly to tradition and shifting more towards personal practice and personal, um, really practical things that I was doing. And um, I wasn't really trying to even integrate a lot of the like things my past, but what ended up happening is that when I started moving towards this direction, like a lot of stuff started making sense, and then a lot of stuff that didn't make sense started falling away. And I was just like, this is just, you know, not as important. And there was also mixed with it a lot of like, I don't even want to mess with this anymore. I don't want to mess with this type of theology. And there's a lot of kind of bitterness in the beginning of just frustration around really unhelpful and really hurtful things that I grew up with. And in the beginning, it was really easy to see those things and really hard to see the really beautiful things. But like the further I got along and the more I just started developing a real rich inner life, the more I was able to just soften around um, the the really like hurtful, harmful things and let them go, and then really focus on a real sense of gratitude and thankfulness around the really beautiful parts of my religious tradition and my experiences growing up, and how to integrate them into my life in a way that was really beautiful and was cultivating the good and was, you know, mo- moving me more towards generosity and a real sense of loving kindness that was active and really, really genuine and sincere patience, like patient endurance. There's this Dhamma talk I was listening to yesterday, and there's this quote that will stay with me forever, where this monk said, "There's a difference between bitter endurance and patient endurance." It was so good. Um, and so there's so many elements to the Christian tradition I grew up with, that are still important to me today, that help me stay in a place of joy and endure really challenging things without having to feel like I have to grit my teeth and be bitter and have this really tightness and to just push through it. But that there is this type of endurance that I can experience, um, that I may not like what's happening and it may not feel good, but I can still maintain a sense of joy and peace through it. So, yeah, let's see how much time I got left. There's a lot more I could say about this. All right, I'm going to talk for 4 or 5 more minutes and then land the plane. Um, there is this the father of the Buddhist tradition I'm a part of. His name, the current living father, his name is Ajahn Sumedho, and he wrote these 5 books that are um, really beautiful. Actually, I'll get them real quick and show them to you. So, one of the coolest things about the Theravada tradition, the forest tradition, is they put out a ton of books. They make really beautiful books. These are all books, and they're not for sale. They give all of them away for free. And so this is the anthology that I have. And in this first book, Peace is a Simple Step, which is a hilarious title, um, he he has this commentary on religion, where he reflects on, I think he kind of even talks about the 60s and kind of moving forward and how we've created this really reactionary relationship with religion where we either just like accept it and like kind of drink the Kool-Aid and buy in and don't question anything, and um, can live really shallow lives depending on the tradition we're a part of, or we just push it away and vilify it, and um, that keeps us from being able to actually engage with religion in a way that can be really helpful and generative. And he talks about, the path forward is to relate to it as a tool, um, and understand that that tool or that series of tools, I think may be more helpful to understand it as like a tool shed, and a shed that has a lot of tools in it. And those certain tools can be used really powerful for certain things. But if we take one of those tools, or we even take the shed, and we think that that shed is the end all be all and the thing to be maybe worshipped or um, held on to, like the in the Buddhist traditions, our refuge can't be in the tool shed, and for a lot of reasons it can't. But if we can understand it as tools and how to use those tools skillfully and usefully, it can be really, really healthy. And that's been my latest kind of shift. So um, I have currently moved towards definitely embracing the parts of Christianity that I grew up with, even though I'm not really practicing Christianity in a community standpoint. Um, and then I'm very my Buddhist practices and involvement in the Thai Force tradition is really important to me and is this tremendous support. But I don't, um, at least I don't think I see myself as a Buddhist. Like I know there's parts of me that I can tend to really grasp. Oh, I'm this person who's found this really awesome tradition, and um, there's like kind of unhelpful ways that I develop a sense of self around that. But I think I think anyways, the majority of the time I really use the teachings and the practices in this Thai forest tradition and my engagement with the the monks, and then my little lay center in Portland. I use them to um, help me cultivate a life of goodness, a life that's not going to create any more suffering for me or other people. And I would even use the Christian language and say a life where I'm growing into the likeness of Christ, and I'm becoming someone who can really um, allow that uh, that Christic energy to flow through me more freely, and to really pattern my life off of uh, Yahusha's uh, Jesus's name. Um, the name he was called was Yahusha. It wasn't Jesus. Um, so I had a friend recently kind of clue me into that, and it really stuck. This is probably the only thing I'll say about Christianity right now from a critique standpoint. It really stuck with me because I think Jesus, the name Jesus, is connected, at least for me, to a Western version and an American version of um, that person that lived, of Yahusha. And it's obviously there's a lot more that goes on, like when Christianity was Romanized and you had Roman Catholicism, and then the reaction was created from into the Protestant church. There's a lot of I think things that got lost in understanding the person Yahusha who actually lived in the Middle East, was not white, um, and didn't necessarily have white conservative values, um, and the person Yahusha who actually was Jewish and um, had a lot of really countercultural values and lived a life that was really powerful and provocative, especially to systems of power. And I think that the person of Jesus has completely lost any uh, kind of corporate identity of how God responds to power. Um, and it's really evident in our current political climate. But, anyways, yeah. Yeah, I would say my involvement in using the Buddhist tradition as a path, a very clear cut path, and a very practice oriented, embodied path, lines up in some ways completely with um, the direction I was headed when I was engaged in Christianity. So I definitely see them as their own separate entities, and beautiful things about one and beautiful things about the other. But for me, at the deepest parts of it and how it plays itself out, they're one. It's the same. It's the same path, which I know is super offensive to a lot of people, maybe in a Buddhist tradition and a Christian tradition. But for me personally, the the heart behind it all is the same. It's just like I just want to grow in um, being someone who's more loving, more patient, more gracious, more kind, more generous, and more connected to myself, more connected to the divine, more connected to um, my own human experience. And then there's a lot of other things. I think I'm going way over the time I wanted to. It's all right. There's a lot of other things in Buddhism that have been new that I have had access to that I'm so thankful for. Um, and maybe that I'll save that for another talk. But yeah, for me, it was a very intuitive journey. It still is very still has been very personal one, and that was kind of formed in the first stages that I talked about. Everything kind of started shifting and shaking around high school, and as Jesus puts it, or Yahusha puts it, uh, the wineskin wasn't holding the wine anymore, and there was new wine, and it was kind of tearing apart. So I needed to find some new wineskin, and that was a consistent process of new wineskin, new wine, new wineskin, new wine, and currently the Theravada tradition has been a really wonderful wineskin to hold um, what it is that's important for me right now and make efforts to move towards um, the good and the pure and the lovely. And so yeah, um, let's see if there's 3 people on. I will give another 5 minutes to see if anyone wants to ask me any questions about it. Shoot me a text if you're on your phone, um, or even like a one-word thing. Looks like my Aunt Kimmy is driving while she's listening. And I'll try to give as brief as I can a response to it. Maybe I'll do a follow-up on the first part of next video and respond to some of this. I do want to apologize. I feel pretty tired and not so mentally gathered, but I think I got enough out that I wanted to get out. I wasn't too all over the place. See if I can find this quote. These books are great, but they're really jammed in here. I'm talking about these. I'm going to try to find this quote in case no one had any response. Looks like there's 3 people on, but they may not be able to give me any their own thoughts, feedback. I know it's in the beginning. Yeah, it's the very first chapter. It's called Religious Convention and Practice. Yeah, he says nowadays there is a tendency to think that religious convention and form are no longer necessary. There is a vague hope that if you can just be mindful and know yourself, that's all you need to do. Says we're prone to having blind attachments. For example, you say you're locked up in a foul, stinking prison cell, and the Buddha comes and says, "Here's the key. All you have to do is take it and put it in the hole there underneath the door handle. Turn it to the right, turn the handle, open the door, walk out, and you're free." But you might be so used to being locked up in prison that you don't quite understand the directions. So you say, "Oh, the Lord has given me this key," and you hang it on the wall and pray to it every day. That might make your stay in prison a little more happy. You might be able to endure all the hardships and the stench of your foul smelling cell a little better. But you're still in the cell because you haven't understood that it wasn't the key in itself that was going to save you. Due to lack of intelligence and understanding, you just grasp the key blindly. That's what happens in all religion. We just grasp the key to worship it, pray to it, but we don't actually learn how to use it. So let's see if anyone said anything. Well, no questions. So I'll land the boat with that quote, which was much better said than the way I worded it. But yeah, so just learning to use religion, whether it's Christianity or Buddhism or Hinduism or whatever it is, as the key, learning how to use it well and properly to get me out of my prison cell, so to speak. Um, and you, instead of worshiping it and um, finding ways to wrap my identity around it in unhelpful ways, um, or just discarding the key and throwing it away completely. Um, so that's been kind of my latest way of relating to religion and Christianity and all of that. So hopefully some of that was helpful to Michelle specifically, who asked for that question. Um, Again, I create these for myself so I can go back and kind of look and see what I was thinking, but also to have fun conversations. And um, so if you have any feedback, things you like, things you didn't like, things that concerned you, things that were you thought were terrible, anything. Uh, I love I love the conversations that have come from these videos just as much as creating the videos or any of it. It's all been fun, but please send me your feedback. We'd love to hear it. Um, Hope y'all have a great day, weekend, right? Yeah, weekend, and hopefully I'll be back on sometime in the next week or two.